And there's probably poppy seeds in my teeth. You know. Oh, this camera battery's not gonna last. It's okay. There. Hi, welcome to FiberLoveDiary. I'm Trisha if we haven't met, and if we have met, welcome back. How are you? Seriously, how are you? So this is the channel where I document my fiber journey, my fiber arts journey. So there's like spinning, weaving, knitting, crocheting at times, dyeing. What else? I plan to do some felting, and another thing that I don't actually want to say what it's called because I'm afraid I won't get to it for a long time and I don't want anyone to get excited. We are doing well. A lot has been going on. I feel like I'm tired and like super busy, but maybe it's the end of summer. You know, sometimes the end of summer is just way too busy. I knew this was gonna, I got a dead battery already. I'll be right back. A lot of times when I do videos, I try to anticipate what people will ask me and I never get all of it. Or sometimes people watch a video and just miss something and ask questions later. So I keep track of all the questions, and I have 5 pages of questions today. I'm gonna spin while I answer them. I think I'm a little worried this wheel is gonna make noise, but it's okay. And I'm gonna spin some fiber from my shop. This is Jen. It is a merino top, and it's just dyed like with a couple shades of green, some aqua, blue, and purple. These are kind of my happy place colors, although I really like every color. I am spinning 2 other projects. I have one that is, I can't remember what the base wool is. It was dyed by another local dyer here, and it's like a dark sprucey kind of green. It's going to be Christmas trees for my mantle. You've seen those before, but this year I'm gonna add some trees. That's on my electric eel wheel, and then on my handset I am currently spinning the Romney, I think it was a Romney cross fleece that I made a tweed into. For a while I was thinking it was Finn, but it wasn't. I am down to the last 2, I think 2 bats. I have less than 2 bats to go on that, and I have 3 of the giant Hanson bobbins full. So that's not too far from being done. I'm gonna split this. And I will be spinning on my Kromsky Minstrel as long as it's not making a ton of noise. I haven't oiled it in a while, so I don't actually know if it's gonna make any noise, but it's okay. Let's get to the questions, because this is gonna take a while. If you need to pause and go get a project or a cup of tea or perhaps a glass of wine, please do. This is the perfect opportunity because we're about to get into it. Ooh, I do have a couple of things for props over here. And the very first question, I'm not gonna start spinning because the very first question, I need to actually show you one of the props. So this is from Carol Norman. She said, I'm probably really stupid. Don't say that, Carol, you're not. I'm not supposed to say bad things about myself anymore, and I've noticed that like I've become so sensitive when people do it. You are not stupid, but could you show exactly how you braid your tops, please? So I grabbed this. I'm gonna separate it because it really doesn't matter since it's all one color. It doesn't matter if I separate it. All right, so when I do my own tops, I untwist them. They tend to get twisted like when you roll them up into a ball. So I always untwist them, okay? And we'll just do the shorter piece. It'll be easier to see. I take one end. I'm gonna put you behind me. I take one end and then I have a loop at the top and the other end is down here. I try to even it up so that if I pulled this hoop out straight, they'd be pretty close to the same length. That's close enough. Just like that. Now I go back to the top, do not change anything, but you literally start braiding it. So if I start like this, I'll just put this in the middle. It's easier to cross them over the end. And then you just start braiding a 3-strand braid. Okay, and then occasionally you're gonna pull out the one that's loose because otherwise you also get a braid coming up from the bottom. So I'll cross like 3 times, so 1, 2, 3, and then I know that that one that has an end has come to the other side. I'll pull it out. It's not this slow when you've done it a while. And then I'll just do it again. 1, 2, 3, and see now that end came out on the other side. So 1, 2, 3, the end came out, 1, 2, 3. It's coming out now on its own because it's so short. So okay, so then I tuck in the last little end and let it come out just like that. And a lot of times, because these tend to like let fibers off, I will just bend it over, because this is the top end. I'll just bend it and tuck the floofy end in just like that. This is what it will look like on both sides. That is for most of my braids. If I dye a braid that's a gradient, that's the only time where I'll do what they call like a crochet chain type thing. I don't think that mine turn out great this way. So when I do that, you're gonna wanna just like watch this video on slow-mo and practice. I will cross the end over and make a loop around these fingers. Okay, then I'll take my thumb and index finger and go in from behind and flip that loop down and pull through. Okay, so you've pulled a little loop through just like as if you were crocheting. I've pulled it through from this side. I like to switch the side. I feel like for me, it turns out a little smoother if I do that. So I've pulled it from here, and what I'll do is come in again with my thumb and index finger on the other side, reach down, and pull up another loop. And again, I'm pulling from this side. I'll come back in over here. This is all twisted, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so pull it. When you do it this way, you're going from one end to the other, and you will preserve any gradient you have. So one side will still look braided, this side will still look braided, but if you look at the back, it'll look a little bit different. I don't even really know how to describe it. It's like the back of a crochet chain, because it's a crochet chain. So that's what I do if it's a gradient. But most of the time I use the other method. People do ask that a lot. Okay, this question is from Jerry. She has been watching for a long time. Many of you know her, and she said, the space is so nice and bright. Is this on your property? This is the new dye space, which I think I have decided on a name for it, but I'm gonna let you guys know later when we're dyeing in there for the next time. This is on our property. When we bought this house 7 years ago, we were moving to be closer to where John works, and there are like three things that drew us to the house. And it's not the house itself, weirdly enough. It was that we have a few acres here. We have like just under 4, a little bit under 4. It had a 1,000 square foot outbuilding that the previous owner ran his business out of, and that's the building that you saw. He added 2 offices on the back, and it's one of the 2 offices. So that's the room that I have. We also have a shed that holds all of our lawn equipment, and we have a cabana. So the outbuildings were the second thing that attracted us to the property, even though we've since realized that it's just like more stuff to take care of, honestly. The third thing was the pool. We had an in-ground pool at a house we rented in Jamaica, and John just kind of fell in love with it. I grew up with an in-ground pool, so I have always thought, you know, it's pretty awesome to have. And so I've always like been a water person. I like swimming and all that stuff. So I've always kind of wanted a pool, but after that trip, he was like, yes, we do need an in-ground pool. It would be so great. Those are the 3 things that attracted us here. So it is on the property. John said he thinks door to door, like our back door that I go out of to get out there to the barn door is like, I think he said 30 yards maybe. It's so close. It's really nice. Tracy asked, Trish, have you seen Escape to the Chateau? I've totally seen it. I absolutely loved it. Imagine just being able to do whatever like crazy ideas you come up with in a like 300-year-old house. Amazing. I watched it on Peacock. It's a couple from the UK with 2 little kids. At least they start out little, they grow during the show. They buy a French chateau, which I want to say was built in the 1600s, but I honestly might not have that right. And it's got a moat. I mean, it is so cool. And they renovate it, sort of. They don't, I wouldn't say they restore it. They renovate it. They put some campsites on the property. They like build gardens and they host weddings after that and like use it for a family business. Really awesome. They're so super creative and I love it. We could never partly do that because the wife in that couple, and I can't remember their names off the top of my head, comes up with amazing, creative, beautiful ideas, and then the husband like goes and has to carry them out. And I know you guys think John spoils me and like loves me more than anything, but I can tell you that if I came up with ideas like that, he would be like, you need to calm down. I promise you. But yes, I have seen it. I love the show. I've been thinking that this winter I will watch it over again, you know, when we're stuck in the house all the time, because she was so creative. She had so many cool ideas. And I think I might be able to do some of it like on a more, you know, everyday kind of scale. Pat Fain said, I'm always searching for black fleece. Why does it seem so rare? Okay, so I have also looked for black fleece a lot, and you know, I'm not a sheep expert. I love sheep and I think I do know, you know, a fair amount, but I think it's because since sheep are outside 24/7, their tips of their fleeces never stay black. Even if they have a really black fleece, which is only part of the battle, the tips get like bleached from the sun. Once you blend those tips in, it always lightens the fleece quite a bit. But I think it's really like human beings. Like you think you see people with black hair probably occasionally, but if you actually like got in close, you would find out 99% of the time their hair is just very dark brown, and that it had other colors in it usually. A head of hair or a fleece of hair that is like truly all one color and doesn't have other colors in it is just rare, just like with us. I mean, our hair is actually made up of a bunch of different colors. Mine's made up with extra colors, as you know, but that's okay. Karen Arnott asked, just a quick question. What can I use instead of Dawn for washing fleece? She was in the UK. I don't remember exactly where, but so the thing that makes Dawn so great for this is that it is specifically formulated to cut through grease on like pots and pans. Anything that's formulated for that specific purpose would work really well unless it has enzymes in it. That's one of the things that makes Dawn really good as well. If you buy the classic, they haven't added enzymes to eat grease, because a lot of cleansers or detergents have started to do that. And it does work really well, but it also eats the protein fibers, and you don't want that obviously with your fleece, especially if you're going to soak it for a while. I mean, there is mixed opinions on whether or not you can use enzymatic cleaners for short periods of time. I am okay with it, but I will test first, and I will keep a soak with an enzymatic cleaner very, very short. Just know that the enzymatic cleaners that have enzymes can damage things if they're soaked too long. You should always test it if you're gonna try it, and just be very careful with those. This is Frosty Genie. She said, hi, I love your videos. In one of your previous videos, you mentioned you have a few carders. I'm wondering, what is your current go-to carders? I have 2 right now. I have had 3, I think just 3 prior to this. I know I say just 3 like it's no big deal. The 2 I have right now are the Strouch Finest, and it's an electric one. It's the XL, I think. And then I have a classic carder. It's the biggest one they make, but it is manual. I have 2 because I think they do different things best. I'm gonna tell you what, if I'm gonna do what, where do I go? If I'm gonna make bats, I go to the classic. If I want to card a raw or washed fiber and it's more coarse, I will go to the classic again. And if I want to card a washed fiber that's more fine, I will go to the Strouch Finest. If I want to take two colors and really blend them, not like making a bat where you might just lay them on top of each other or you spread them out over each other but they don't truly get blended. If I really want to run it through a couple times and really blend it, I like the finest for that. That's why I have two. I would not have more than one if I didn't think that, you know, one was good at one thing, and you know what I mean? I wouldn't take the space up if I didn't think that they had very different strengths. Okay, Kathy Tedford said, thanks so much. I do have a question, actually many questions. I have been learning to spin for about 2 years and I can make yarn. I use cards for some Cormo wool and I use combs for Romney imperfectly. Can the prep affect the consistency of the spin? I love that question. I did do a video, I'll try to remember to link it, on some tips about consistency, and prep is actually one of them. This is a huge topic, so boiling it down is going to be kind of hard. Prep does make a huge difference. I personally probably would have switched the two types of wool you're talking about with prep. It's never hard and fast, it's never set in stone, so I would have tested it, but normally if I have Cormo, it's so fine that I will comb it. It also depends, but it can be quite long. If I have Romney, what I have discovered with Romney is that I can pretty much do anything with it for the most part and get a pretty consistent spin. But yes, it can affect it a lot. And if you're trying to card something that's very fine, you very well may have some neps in it that are caused by that very fine fiber pulling and then snapping and springing back on itself and creating little, they're not noils, right? Those are the neps. This is only an opinion, but I think combing is probably in almost every case going to give you a more consistent spin. So combing makes all the fibers parallel to each other, and that is going to make it so you don't have things causing a little lump that are just like a little swirl of fiber in there, because it's all going in one direction to begin with. And so that's going to make a big difference. It's also going to remove the kinds of things that cause little lumps and bumps. So I personally feel that in almost every case, combing is going to give you a more consistent yarn. Comb top or combing it yourself. The prep, in my opinion, that's why I do so many different types of prep. That's why I test them, why I have so many tools so I can do different types, why I've shown like spinning from the cloud, you know, spinning from locks, flicking locks. I've done so many different things, and I think it's because the prep affects the finished yarn always. If you're trying to fight your prep to create a yarn that it doesn't lend itself to, let's say, it's not going to be as much fun either. So this is supposed to be fun. It'll start to help you over time predict what you're going to get when you do what, if you just keep sampling and trying different things with different types of fleece. Witchcrafts ask, can you do worsted spin off of a bat? This is always so hard for me to explain because, like, again, the topic is so huge. People use the term woolen and worsted for prep, and then also for drafting and what type of yarns you get. And it's not always super clear to a lot of people that you could have like a semi-worsted, which would mean that the prep, this is my opinion, the prep is worsted but the draft is woolen. The reason I would call that semi-worsted is because the prep is the prep. It's either worsted or woolen. End of story. You can change a worsted prep to a woolen prep, but you can't really change back. But the drafting you can always control. So I always think of the word when you use semi whatever, that should be the prep. That's my opinion. It isn't always that way. So you can't do a true worsted off a bat because a bat is always going to be a woolen prep. You can do a semi-woolen, so you can draft it with a worsted style drafting method. The fibers are still not going to be exactly perfectly parallel lined up like they would be if you combed it. You can get it closer to worsted from a bat, but you cannot get a true worsted from a bat. Candy asked about the doll clothes that I've been sewing. I'm loving it so much. It's making me so happy. I've cut out another dress. And after I cut it out, I was like, should I have actually done some machine embroidery on these pieces of the dress first and then cut them out? So I may go back and embroider the skirt of the dress prior to sewing, or I may even embroider like on a big piece of material and then cut it out after. I'm getting a little extra when it comes to the doll clothes, but it's okay because they're tiny, they don't cost a lot, they don't take a lot of time to make, and it's making me so super happy. I don't have any free patterns for her. She is a 13-inch baby doll, and in the 70s they did like a small, medium, and large baby doll series. I think it was Simplicity. And so I have 4 patterns from Simplicity, all of them in the small size, which is a 13 to 14-inch doll. If you find any free ones for a 13-inch baby doll, please do send me a link, because I would definitely, you know, consider branching out. I haven't made everything I want to from the patterns that I already have though. You know, I'd be happy to collect some more patterns for in the future. Okay, Elizabeth Ernest asked when I was sampling Sydney, what is, well, she said spinning milk, is it like a conditioner? I haven't used it in a while, but if you have something that's really staticky, or if your like environment is very dry, it can be really good. What I like is almond oil, and then I sometimes mix a few drops of other things in with it, and you just put it in a little spray bottle and mist it. You do not need a lot. The main reason I use it is because it helps to tame down the static electricity, but if you use water for that, it just comes right back over and over. It actually gets worse if you use water, but if you use a little bit of carding milk, you won't have that. And I think that Abby Frankemont maybe had a recipe for it, and I bet there's one in the Alden Amos book. So this is the washing of Sydney's fleece. Kate said, would love some fleece, but since I can't really spin yet, it would be wasted on me. Do you rinse in cold water? I find it takes soap out better. Hope life is treating you and John better now. Thanks, it is. So the reason that I don't use cold water is because when you wash, or when you put fleece, wool fleece, in very hot water, not the follicles, what do you call them? The cuticle of the hair opens up. So it's kind of like shingles on a roof. If this is the shaft of the hair, it's got shingles coming off of it. And when you put it in hot water, the shingles open up. This is how you felt wool. If you agitate it while those shingles, they're not called shingles, while they're open like this, if you agitate it, all different fibers of the hair, those shingles will kind of interweave each other. They'll get not connected, but they'll get interlocked almost. And then when you put it in cold water, or when the water cools off, those follicle cuticle thingies, the cuticles, will lay back down. Slowly, they'll just sort of push each other apart. So if there was one shoved up underneath there, it'll just kind of shove it out. If it does it quickly, if you quickly immerse that in cold water, it's gonna slam down and grab. I don't rinse it in cold water because the very quick shock from the hot to cold would almost certainly cause some felting. But one thing that some people do that I haven't done for a while is you can add some white vinegar to your final rinse. I still feel like if I have rinsed it, for me, pretty well, a little bit of soap residue isn't a big deal. After I finish the yarn, I'm probably gonna wash it. You know, after I finish the garment, I'm gonna wash it or at least soak it. So if there's a small amount of residue, I don't care. Stitches and Scraps said, I want to try this. About how much denim did you need? That is a question about the denim rug that I wove for our camper. It just really depends on how big of a rug you want to make. I think I had 3 pairs of jeans. I probably used 1/3 of them. It wasn't a lot, but it's a tiny little rug, so it just really depends on how big of a rug you want to make. And if you want to figure out like how much length of the pieces you need, you can go to weaveolution.com, I think it is. I'll actually link to that too. They have a weaving calculator where you can put in like the length of your finished piece and how much you think it's going to spring back. I mean, you don't always know that unless you do a sample, but you can do like number of picks per inch and all those things, and it'll tell you how much length of warp and weft you need. So it's really, really handy. I will link it below. Jojo asked, how do you spin to weave a wrap? A warp, sorry, weave a warp. So I have used all kinds of hand spun for warp on my rigid heddle loom. You do not have to be super like careful about how strong the warp is. You can't have things that are gonna just drift apart, and honestly you are gonna abrade the warp to a degree. So it is easier probably to have something that's a little smoother or something that's commercially spun. If it is textury, really all you need is to see if it'll snap easily when you pull it. But also you can remember that all the tension on the loom isn't going to be on just one strand. It's going to be spread out over all the strands of your warp. So I have used stuff that I think a lot of people would be afraid to use, and you just have to be a little more gentle. And a rigid heddle loom gives you the opportunity to be a little more gentle on your warp. If you're trying it on a floor loom or a table loom, it's really a different story. It needs to be stronger. You probably need it to be a bit smoother. So I think you're asking about a rigid heddle loom. I hope you are. And I feel like there is a ton of hand spun that you can use as a warp on your rigid heddle loom. Next question, what is the staple length on that Erie silk? Lucky for you, I grabbed it. So let's check. Okay. Oh my goodness, it's just floating everywhere. It's really hard to see. It's pretty long. I'm definitely holding both ends, but I'm pretty close to the end. So I'm gonna measure it on the arm of the couch. I grabbed a tape measure too, because I knew this was one of the questions. I'm gonna say it looks like it's about 6 to 7 inches long. So it's a pretty good long staple. That is gonna spin up so cool. What do you think? Should we dye this? I'm feeling like maybe we should. Okay, Sandy said, OMG, what energy you must have. This was the week where I filmed everything I did for a whole week. I may do that again. What do you guys think about that? She said, do you have a podcast where you spin a silk hanky? I do not. I tried a few times, like earlier on in my spinning journey, and didn't love it. And then I saw recently, and I got a few tips from Kai, whose channel is called Fiber by Nature. I will link it. And Kai did some silk hanky creation and some spinning recently. And when I tried it again this time, like with the tips and also knowing a little bit more than I did then, it was much, much better. Kai's got some tips and tricks. Actually, I'll link you to that video. Oh, Rachel asked about the same video, the week-long vlog. She said, wow, so much fibery fun. What was your favorite part? By far, my favorite part was cutting that huge long piece of cloth off the loom. It seemed like it took a long time, but it is the longest warp that I've ever woven by far. I think it's double the longest I've ever woven. And so it felt like such an accomplishment. And also considering that it was like twice as long as the longest I've ever done before, it seemed like it went fast, and I was just like really proud of myself. I also like how that fabric turned out. I didn't know when I came up with the idea, like I'm just gonna pick a palette, I want random stripes, and then I'm like, you know, your brain won't want to make them random. It's gonna want to sprinkle in those brighter colors like more evenly. How can I make it random? Blah blah. I was a little scared that I wasn't gonna really take to the cloth because it's so, I mean, a stripe isn't different, but in a way it is kind of different. It's nothing I've ever seen anyone else do. And I loved it. I was so happy with it. I couldn't wait to sew with it and do all that stuff. So it was really pulling that cloth off the loom. So Roxanne Richardson said, when using your drum carder, how are you deciding when you're going to feed the fiber in through the liquor in versus applying it directly onto the drum. I have kind of touched on this before. It's a hard one because I hate when stuff gets like built up on the liquor in. It annoys the crap out of me. And sometimes I watch other people making bat videos and their liquor is just like caked in stuff. There are certain things that get very staticky. And also there are certain things that are very, very short fibers, and then the Angelinas and Stellinas, all those kinds of nylon-y things, none of those like to be pulled in and then transferred to the big drum. They tend, especially Stellina and Angelina, which is like the flat ones that are cut into just tiny little strips, those tend to fall. So if you try to feed those in through your liquor in, you can sandwich them between 2 layers of wool and that will help, but I generally put those right on. So it's like anything that's gonna get super staticky, that isn't gonna stick well as it's being pulled off the smaller drum or the liquor in, and is just gonna fall. So those types of like fibers, and then anything that's super short, so like sari silk, if I have faux cashmere, or I'm trying to think what else short I might add, maybe some cotton, all those things I like to put directly on the big drum just because of that. And gourd too, even though that's not always very short, it often just doesn't like the transfer process. That's the main things that I will put on the drum. But if I want to be very precise in where things are placed or how they are spread out, sometimes I'll just put them directly on the drum anyway, no matter what they are, because as they are pulled in and pulled onto the bigger drum, they're always going to get opened up and slowly fed onto the bigger drum. That's the whole point. And sometimes I don't want them to go on slowly. I want it precisely placed where something's going to be, and if I go directly to the big drum, I can put it exactly where I want it. So those are the main reasons. Okay, Kate asked, what are you going to do with that lovely piece of fabric? So that's the same, the weaving one. I did turn it into like 7, 8, 9 towels or something, and those were bought from my shop immediately, so thank you, you know who you are. And then I'm using the rest of it to sew with. It is something I've wanted to do for a long time, just like get better at sewing with fabrics that I've created on my loom. And that's partly why I started sewing the doll clothes, because I figured I've known the sewing basics most of my life, but in order to make like finished items look really polished, I felt like I needed practice, and that has helped me a lot. So I've been sewing with the striped fabric. I wanted to do some more different bags. I just haven't really gotten to it this week, but I plan to do more sewing with it. I saved a bunch of it for that. Sorry, that's my vacuum. Okay, Bonnie McGee said, all I can say is, wow, you are one busy lady, but I have one question to ask. What do you prefer spinning on? What do you prefer spinning on? The e-spinner for traditional, hang on, let me try this again. But I have one question to ask. What do you prefer spinning on the e-spinner for traditional, spinning wheel for spinning? I'm not sure what you're asking, Bonnie, but I don't really have a strong preference. The main reasons I like the e-spinners are because they're so portable and because they're so infinitely adjustable on speed. With the Hansen, I have the woolly winder, and that's very handy. So those are the main reasons I would pick the e-spinners. Being able to just throw it in a backpack and take it somewhere rather than like drag a big wheel somewhere is very nice if you like to go spin at events or whatever. Becky Shook asked, I have a question. When you cut the towels apart, did you have to sew first to prevent raveling? I will be coming up on that pretty soon. I love it. It's a good question. I have done that before. In the past, when I did towels, I would often put what I call a cutting thread. So it's like a contrasting color thread at the end of the towel where I'm gonna cut. And so when I do that, in the past, I have taken the towels off and zigzagged up either side of that cutting thread and then cut it. But what I have found is that I don't really need to do that. I can understand why people do, and it isn't wrong, and it might be more comfortable in the beginning. I like to iron my hems and also clip them with those little plastic clips instead of pinning them, but there's nothing wrong with pinning them. But if you iron them, as long as you don't pull them horizontally as you are, and you're just very careful, because you can spread them apart very easily if you pull too much. But I don't have any problems if I iron them without any kind of stabilizing. If you want to wash them before you hem them, please do that. But I don't. I also like to wash after my hem because I like the way that the fabric kind of blooms up around the stitching. It's just the way I like it. If you were gonna wash them, you definitely should zigzag to stabilize. There is a video somewhere where I did that. I'm not sure which one it was, so I can't tell you. Okay, Elizabeth asked, she said, I wish I could have a fibery week like yours every week. Was that an old math workbook you used to stuff the warping bar box with? It is actually, I told her this in the comments, it is actually a Uline catalog. I ordered boxes from them one time, and since then I have found better prices on the exact same boxes. Those boxes are so expensive, you guys, oh my gosh. I ordered boxes from them once, and ever since then they send me these big catalogs. I try to get off the mailing list. I can't get off the mailing list. So I, rather than just immediately recycling them, I use them to stuff the boxes as padding, because it really doesn't need a lot of padding. It's in bubble wrap, whatever. And I hope that the person at the other end will recycle them. So then they've gotten reused and recycled instead of just straight to recycling. It's probably a silly distinction, but it makes my brain feel better. I do not have the name on this one, I'm sorry. Oh, this is about, gosh, last fall, I think. Maybe it wasn't, maybe it was last summer. I used the Toil and Trouble blend. It's like a Halloween themed blend. And I spun some art yarn and wove a scarf with it. And she said, OMG, your scarf is so pretty. It is exactly what I want to do. Did you keep the original reed of the loom, or did you buy another? I'm not sure. But I know I said in the video what DPI reed I used. I think I used the 5 DPI, but I am not 100% sure. My loom came with a 7.5 DPI reed. So I have a 5, a 7.5, which came with it, a 10, and a 12.5. Those are the sizes that I have. I believe there's a 15, but I don't have one. Susie Gleason said, where could I buy a big card for Shangora? It kind of depends on what you mean by big. The classic carder, the largest size of the classic carder is pretty big. You can get that right on Etsy. And Brother makes big carders. What was that other big one I had? The extra large, Fancy Kitty. They make quite big carders. So they could be worth looking at. And Boss Hog also makes quite a big carder. So I think it just depends on what you actually mean by a big carder. Chris Teague asked about the t-shirt rug. She said, such a good way to use old shirts. Did you cut little loops from the t-shirt sleeves too? So that was one question. And I did. I cut the t-shirts like from armpits down in the loops. And then also I did use the sleeves. I don't know why I'm showing you on this, but I cut them as much as I could make loops out of the sleeves. I did. I used as much as I could. This is about the same video. It says, rug is gorgeous. Question, what kind of hairs? Oh, sorry, different rug. This is the rug that I did for the French doors back here. And she said, what kind of Harrisville loom is it? Rug loom or regular loom? You can weave a rug on a regular loom, but if you get a rug loom, it's harder to do regular weaving. Generally, a rug loom only has 2 shafts, so you can't do as much. You can do more what you can do with a rigid Heddle loom, which isn't to say you can't do a lot with it, but it's just not as simple to do complicated patterns as it is on like a loom with more shafts. Rachel said, I forgot to ask, how do I become a YouTube member? I've tried to figure it out, but I can't figure it out. This is just something that supports my channel. YouTube has memberships available. People do different stuff to support. So I've had people give me like donations on Buy Me a Coffee, different things. So this is one way to support, in case you're asking, what is she asking that about? And generally this question happens when someone has an iPhone. So Apple doesn't really want you to support YouTube, which probably YouTube doesn't want you to support Apple either, I don't know. But what you have to do is you have to get on a browser. So like Safari, I don't know, is Safari the browser that you use on an iPhone as well? I don't know. You have to get on a browser and pull up one of my videos, and then you'll see like right around the area where the subscription button or the subscribe button is, it'll say join or join now. And so you hit that button and it'll take you through the process to join. Oh, thank you, Rachel. I appreciate the support. You have no idea. Jackie Brown said the only Heddles I currently have are the 7.5 that came with both my looms. Would that work on this, or would that be too close? This was about the t-shirt rug, so you could do it. Let me start with that. Your warp threads are going to be closer together and more visible, but I don't think that's a bad thing. The only thing you might struggle with a little bit is packing it really tightly. So you may want to let your warp be just a tiny bit looser tension wise while you're weaving, so that you can really pack it in. But you could do it. It would just be a little bit closer together. Teresa said, I love the rugs. How wide is your rigid Heddle loom? You probably said, but I am multitasking as I watch. So my rigid Heddle loom, I have a 32-inch Ashford and I love it. As of yet, I haven't found that I wish I could weave a wider piece very often. Maybe someday I'll wish it was wider. You can always do double the width of any loom you have if you have 2 Heddles and one of those blocks that holds 2 Heddles. I did it in a video years ago, probably 5 years ago now. And it works. It's kind of magical. It's really cool. Candy asked, have you ever cut the shirt as one long piece before? She's talking about the t-shirt rug again. I have made t-shirt yarn with like one long piece of a t-shirt. I don't know if this will make sense, but if this is the body of your t-shirt, you cut slits all the way down, and it's like a tube, right? So you cut slits all the way down, however wide you want your strip to, however far apart you want your strip to be wide. And then you do the same thing over here. Then you cut from one slit and you cut slightly diagonally this way. So you end up cutting your tube into a spiral and you get one long piece. I've made t-shirt yarn before that way, but not for weaving. And I didn't do it for this project because I really wanted the colors to change quickly so I get a lot of color. And if I did that whole long piece of yarn, the spiral from the whole t-shirt, it would have been like a long stripe, and I didn't want that. Froggy asked, oh bless you, how do you have a 36-year-old kid when you look 36 yourself? First of all, this is on a video that was like 3 or 4 years ago. I swear I've aged 10 years in the past like 4 years. It would have been 3 years ago. John's oldest is 10 years younger than me. That's how. So I was 46 and he was 36. John got married kind of young. He was like 20, and they had Joe, I don't know, a year and a half later or something. He's our oldest. So he is like 10 years and 3 months younger than I am. But thank you for saying I looked 36 when I was actually 46. Mwah. Gerald Brown asked, are those egg cartons on your fridge? Yes. When you live in the country, you always know a lot of people who have chickens, and there's always people who want your cartons. That's basically what it boils down to. The Fiber Star said, so beautiful. Wow, you spin your yarn so thin. Do you have any tips? I do have some tips, and I'm gonna do a video on it soon to come. So keep your eyes open. I could give you tips here, but it would be quick, and it'd be much better if you watch the video. It's gonna be like in the next handful of videos. Mel said, looks great. Did you use plain tap water by the cupful to add on top of the dye, or did you use the treated water from the pan you soaked it in? She's talking about a dyeing video, kind of recent one. When, because I pre-soak almost everything I dye in water that has citric acid added to it. And it's like less acidy than lemon juice, if that makes sense. But I don't like to waste it. So if I'm adding water to a pan after I've added dye, I take the dye out of the soak pan, put it in a pan by itself, add dye, and then sometimes I want more water so that I can move the dye around a little bit before I start heating it. I always try to use that citric acid water if I can. Sometimes there isn't enough, but if I can, I will. Kathy Costello said, have you rinsed with Synthropol? I used to do that with cotton to keep it from bleeding. So I would love if somebody here actually could tell me I'm wrong, because my understanding is that Synthropol is just like detergent, water, and rubbing alcohol. So no, I have not, but that's only because, ooh, this is not gonna be popular. I feel like there are a lot of teachers and a lot of fiber industry vendors that are trying to always get us to buy extra stuff that like we really don't necessarily need. If I'm wrong about what is in Synthropol, it would help me actually if somebody would tell me that. Have I used the other things? Have I washed it and used rubbing alcohol on it? Yes, because I have heard that that's all that's in Synthropol. Does it make a difference? I'm not sure. I guess sometime I need to do a side-by-side, and that would be more scientific of a way for me to tell if it's actually doing anything. Sandy asked, do you have a favorite dish towel pattern? I don't. Those of you who have been watching me weave for a long time will know that I will actually have only used a pattern one time. I bought another pattern kind of recently, but I haven't used it yet. The only one I've ever done is called Bertha's towels, or maybe Bertha's kitchen towels from Handwoven. It was from like 2012, and I actually am winding a warp to do that one again. It's an overshot towel pattern, and I want to do towels with it again. Other than that, I always make up my own patterns. Al Totman said, have you tried the Procyon MX dyes? I only have MX dyes available in the UK. There are lots of color bleeding, but the colors are vibrant. I have one that someone accidentally, I think, sent me when I bought out a stash of acid dyes from somebody. I haven't tried it yet. It's purple, I think. But I think I probably should. This is for cotton, by the way. I think I probably should. I am going to be dyeing more cotton in the future, of course. I can't give up until I get it right and really get a method that I'm super happy with. So it'll happen again, I'm sure. Elizabeth asked, I hate that I missed the fun, but I was working to support my fiber habit. I was excited to hear about the dye dungeon moving. Is it the space you said could only be a dream? I answered her in the comments, but it is not that space. That space sold immediately. That space was way more money than I could afford to ever invest, even though I wanted it so bad. We had the most hilarious conversation about it too, but it sold like right away. But thank you for wanting me to have my dream. That's so kind of you. Deb said, what size does your doll wear? I found a bag of doll clothes that might fit her. So she's a 13-inch baby doll. Jennifer Miller said, congratulations, those blends are gorgeous. I struggle sometimes with the best way to spin wool blended with silk. Silk, how do you spin it? It depends. It totally depends. But if you're struggling, I would suggest that you try spinning it from the folds. And also I would want you to tell me like what is the actual struggle you're having. Cheap Engineer Crafts said, beginner here, I want to try a fractal, but I'm unsure about spinning a consistent single with different cross sections of fiber. Any tips on spinning across consistently? I think you're asking about spinning across the top of across the top. I did do a video. I used top for that video, so I look it up. I will be linking it below because someone else had a comment about this, and it was all about consistency. Hopefully that will help you out. Again, I'll link it below. When you're newer, especially, a control card can be your best friend, and It isn't something that I do very often anymore. I've done all this so long, a lot of it has become almost instinct, but a lot of times for a newer spinner, a control card can be super, super helpful to keep consistency over a big spin. Jeremy said, is it possible to do this with just the reed I have with my loom? That was the rainbow dish towels. It depends on what your reed is. Those were the rainbow dish towels that I did on the rigid Heddle loom. So that is technically 12.5 ends per inch, but they're doubled. It's not really 25 ends per inch. It's really 12.5 of doubled yarn. I don't know which reed you have, so I'm not sure, but I don't think it will come out the same. You can do other things, but it will not come out the same. Sorry. Spending the money on the Heddles is the most annoying thing in the world, but sometimes there's really no way around it. A few months ago, it's probably been about 3 months now, I did a live with you guys where I talked about going to therapy, and I'm not sure what the name is on this. It says, "You're so valued, Trish. What can we do in your community to support you? I've had a therapist my entire adult life." Some of you guys have wanted updates. I'm still in therapy. I think it's going super great. I really do. I've learned so much about, I'm sorry, that's my vacuum again. I've learned so much about how we hold things in our bodies, and hopefully that is helping me do things differently in the future. I am a person who just stuffs everything down and just keeps trying to go because whatever. And also I'm somebody who thinks like I have to handle everything alone. The reasons for that don't need to, you know, be said. I feel like it's coming along. Sometimes it's still hard, but I'm trying my best and we're still going in the right direction. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I don't know what anyone can do to support me except for understand if I'm busy working on that and I'm not here when they want me. That's the main thing I need help with and support with. Thank you. We're on the last page. Oh, Tina. Tina said, love, love, love your work. Please answer this question. How much space does all your equipment take up in your crafting room or area? I love this question. I feel like it takes up as much space as I allow it and then some. It's a lot, but I have a lot of equipment. I've been spinning since 2007. I learned it just at the end of that year. So I've been spinning for 16 years. Also, this is my job. So I invest in equipment, sometimes to try it out, to do reviews for you guys, sometimes to be able to say, you know, what I think is good, what I think isn't as great. Sometimes people send me stuff. So you can do it with less equipment than I have. Mine takes up a lot of space. I'm just telling you the truth, because I have looms, carders, hand carders, combs, a warping mill. I mean, I have 3 looms. I have 1 rigid Heddle and 2 floor looms. So it's a lot of space. And then I have like, how many spinning wheels do I have now? 7 or 8? I don't even know. 7? I think I have 7. So it's a lot of space. Leslie said, I've been thinking of dyeing my cotton yarn. Do you really need to use the dyes with soda ash? Technically, yes and no. If you look back at my videos, again, I'll try to remember to link it as I go through and edit. There is a video where I use the tulip tie dyes that you can just buy at like all kinds of craft stores and even some of the like department stores. I think they have it at Walmart if you're in the US. And I used it on a bunch of different plant fibers, but it works on cotton, obviously, because t-shirts. And you do not have to use soda ash. But I think the reason why I say yes and no is because my understanding is that there's some in the dye, that they mix it, they like pre-mix it. You don't have to mess with it if you use those kind of dyes. You do get like less color options, but you can mix them. Do you get less color options? That's debatable. Teeny said, hey Trish, I don't entirely understand why the long wool has less stretch. Could you explain in a future video? Okay, I don't think I said stretch. but I could be wrong. I don't remember what video this was from, and I should have written it on here. Sometimes I actually make a note to tell me what video we're talking about. I think it was about Wensleydale, but there are many types of long wool breeds, and they don't have a crimp. What they typically have is more of a curl, or sometimes even less of a curl, but it generally looks more like a curl than a crimp, the long wools. The crimp is often what provides stretch and bounce to a yarn. So I think that's what I was talking about, like not truly stretch, but like the bounce, the way that you can stretch the yarn out and have it bounce back. That is often a function of the crimp of the wool. And long wools typically, I would say most or all, I can't think of one that actually has crimp instead of like a curl or a wave. So that's the main reason why they have less bounce. Bonnie said, your yarn turned out so pretty. I like the spin cycle look. I don't know what that means. Is that a type of yarn? I don't know. She said, but one question, does it have to be 3-ply? This was about the fractal, the 3-ply fractal I did with the Frankie, the braid called Frankie. Darned if I can remember who dyed it. I'm so sorry. Shoot. It's in the video. I'll link that too. It does not have to be 3-ply. What will be different though if you do a 2-ply is that if you did the same weight of yarn, but it was a 2-ply, the small little pieces of color that you see will actually be bigger. And with the 3-ply, you see more little bits of color, smaller little bits of color in the same length of yarn. So your eye will blend it more. So it does change what it looks like to a degree, but you will still get that barber pole effect with a 2-ply. It will look just a little bit different. Vicky said, I see that you are both braiding and crochet chaining the fiber. Is there a reason, or are your hands doing their own thing? Okay, so this was a video where I was braiding in the chat or whatever. Like I said before, when it's a gradient fiber, I crochet chain it so that you can see the way that the gradient changes throughout that big long strand or whatever. But if it is any other way, I braid it pretty much. Jeremy said, can you teach me about how you're winding and counting yardage? Genius. I can. So I have this Swift that has different marked sizes of yardage of your hanks. And I have my Swift usually set up to be a 2-yard hank. So when I am winding, I'm counting the revolutions. Now, if you're stretching your yarn at all, or if it's one that after you wash it bounces back a lot or whatever, you do have to take that into account. But if I wind onto a 2-yard hank, let's just say I wound onto it 100 times, I know that that was 200 yards, but it's 200 yards under tension. So you do have to remember, like if you get 10% bounce back, that this is gonna be 10% less. Because I do 2 yards every single time I use that Swift, I always know that's what I started with. I think people do this all different ways. Like some people go through the whole process, then they count the wraps. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way. I just feel like if I know I'm doing a 2-yard hank, why would I not count it while I'm wrapping it? And then put that number right on the label. And then if the skein shrinks a little, I still know you just apply that amount to how many times around it went. Catherine Smith said, your Kromsky Lazy Kate is gorgeous. Can you use the shocked matchless bobbins on it? I can. The only bobbins that I struggle with the Kromsky Lazy Kate are the giant Hanson bobbins sometimes rub up against each other. Is there anything else that I have had trouble with? I don't think so. Okay, this says mostly. I'd like to get some silk hankies to spin. Have you ever? I have. I did it during the Tour de Fleece. I really like the yarn I got. I had dyed those previously before we ever even moved here. We've lived here 7 years. So I've had them floating around my house at least 7 years. I actually have packages of them to dye, so I think I'm gonna dye some more sometime soon here and do some more spinning of them because I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I've also been thinking while I was doing that I might want to dye some and then not spin them, but draft them and weave with them, completely unspun. It might be kind of cool. We'll see how it works. It's something I've been thinking about. Okay, last question. Kathia said, amazing fibers, but you need to card those somehow, right? Do you think one could spin them just by pulling from those blobs? Thank you, Trish. That was about the silk cocoons we got in a Paradise package a few months back. I think you could probably spin those, just draft them from the cocoons. You might want to pre-draft them. They come apart really easily. I want to use them for a different type of fiber art. So I guess you guys will see it soon. When I do use them for that, I'll actually try to draft one and just see how it goes. I think you could, but you're gonna get some texture, which would be kind of cool, right? I would try it. I'm going to try it. I'll let you know and I'll film it. I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I didn't get much spinning done because I guess I never do, but I'll quickly show you what I did get done, and I hope you have a great week. See you soon. Thanks. I love you. Bye. That's all the spinning I got done. Oh well, I'll do a little bit now. I'll see you soon. Bye.